Okay, so this is May 8th for the third distance learning packet. And we're continuing with statistics and probability. And this time we're moving into two-way tables. So when we talk about two-way tables, we talk about comparing two different types of things, and usually done through a survey. So a group of students or a group of people are asked two questions. In this case, they're asked, do you have an MP3 player? Yes or no. And do you have a cell phone? Yes or no. And then someone records the data, puts it in this table, and this is called a two-way table. And we can read it by row or by column, and we can look at the ratios or the percentages of the different numbers, and that is called relative frequencies. So again, we've done this. We didn't spend a lot of time, but this is something that you've already practiced. And the key is to really pay attention to the wording of the question, so we know if we're talking about a row or a column, because the numbers that we compare are different, so the ratios are different. So this is just an example. You can go through it, okay, read it, look at the numbers, make sure you understand where they're coming from, and actually this one we have done in class. So this is a two-way table, and the data is about roller coasters at a theme park or an amusement park, and I can't ask a roller coaster question, but you can observe. So basically, is it made out of steel or not? Okay, so probably steel or wood, but we don't know. So steel or not. And then does it have loops? Yes or no. So that's it. So we went around, counted them, and marked it down. And instead of making a table, they made this Venn diagram on the top right. So we need to take those numbers and build our own two-way table to match. Okay, so let's do that first. So just reviewing, Venn diagram, the circles, what's inside the circle is for that thing only. If the circles overlap, then it's shared by both. If the number's outside of both circles, then it's none of those things. So let's see if we can make sense of it and then get those numbers where they go in our table. So steel roller coasters. Okay. So total steel roller coasters. So look at this circle for steel. This is the total. And then what numbers are inside of that circle? Okay, we have the 2 and we have the 6, right? So they're both inside of the steel circle. Let's ignore the other one for a moment. So that would be 8. So 8 total roller coasters are made out of steel. Okay, let's do the same for loops. So if we look at the other circle, we have 4 and a 6 in that circle for loops. So that's 10. 10 total. And so now the loops is on the left. So that's talking about this row. So that total goes here. Okay, and then what else? What about that number, that 6 that's in between, or that's shared by both of them? So that means it is made out of steel and it has loops. So let's see if we can find that on our table. So steel and has loops. That must be here. Okay, and then when we do this, the columns should add to make the total, and then the rows should also add to make the total on the right. So if we have a total number of steel roller coasters, that's 8, 6 have loops, that means 2 do not. Okay, then if we look at the rows now, loops, so if there's 6 steel roller coasters that have loops, then there's 10 total roller coasters with loops, so then there must be 4 that are not made out of steel, so some other material. Okay, and then the last box here, not steel and no loops. Not steel and no loops. So that number would be the one that's outside of both of those circles. So that would be 2. Okay, now we just add these across or add them down to get the total number. So if we go down, 4 plus 2 is 6. Okay, and then if you go over, 2 plus 2 is 4. And then the grand total, this number here, would represent what? What would that be? So the total number of roller coasters that were looked at. So both of these totals going across by row and then going down by column should add up to the same number. And if we look at 8 plus 6, that's 14. And then 10 plus 4 is also 14. So this is 14, which corresponds with the total number of roller coasters at this amusement park, which is actually the answer for number 2. How many roller coasters are there? There are 14 roller coasters. Okay. Next, find the relative frequencies from the table by row. Okay, so by row. And they recreated that table, but it's missing this section here for the total because we don't need the total of the columns because we're looking at the row only. Okay, so there's an example done for us. So it's 6 over 10. 6 over 10. So where does that come from? So steal that number that was in this box is 6 over the total, which is 10. So 0.6, or I like to write it as percent, 60% of the roller coasters that have loops are made from steel. Okay, let's continue filling this in. So 4 out of 10, that's 0.4 or 40%. If we add those together, it's going to be 100%. Okay, and then the second row, 2 out of 4, which is 50%. And the other one is 2 out of 4, which is also 50%. If we add those together, we get 100%. We should get 100%, always. Okay, so it says interpret. So what does that mean? So basically just write a statement about these two relative frequencies. So I would say just choose 2. Let's just highlight the ones that we're going to use. Let's use the one that they gave us, and then let's use this one. So I'm going to do 2 different statements. So the first one, this is where the wording is very important. So we're going to talk about loops first, and then of those, we're going to talk about steel. So we can write that 60% of the roller coasters with loops are made of steel. Okay, so that's the first one. All right, the next one, so we're going to use that box that we highlighted. So 50% of the coasters without loops, or with no loops, let's just use that, with no loops, are not made of steel. Okay, so the order of the word, or the words that we use, that we take from the column or row headings, the order is very important. That tells us if we're using row or column data. Okay, so the next one is now by column. So now they left off this total column off to the side because we don't need it, because we're going to go straight down because we're talking about columns. Okay, so the first example, 6 out of 8. So 6 out of 8, and this would be 2 out of 8. Okay, that's 75%. And this would be 0.25 or 25%, and 100% as we had before. And then looking down, so 4, let me write that better, 4 out of 6, and then the next one is 2 out of 6. So if we simplify this, we get 0.6 repeating, which is 67%. And this we get 0.3 repeating, which is 33%. And then we add those together, we get 100%. Okay? And then let's choose 2 to, choose 2 to write a statement about. Sure, we'll do that. Okay. So the first one. So now our wording has to change a little bit. So first of all, 75% of, and now we're going to use the column header because we're talking about column relative frequencies. So the 75% of the coasters, of the coasters, let's just shorten this a little bit. Of the steel coasters, 70% of the steel coasters have loops. Okay? And then the other one was 33%. 33% of the, I don't know, we could say non-steel, or of the roller coasters not made of steel. And then what do we say? Do not have loops. Do not have loops. All right, so we could have written actually 4 statements based off of this data. But again, 2 is fine. It just shows me that you are able to be careful with your wording, the order of that, and then to correctly find those ratios, and then to convert those into percent. And that is it for that one.